Now it's time for tip-episodes with quick tips you should know. Techniques you can implement into your workflow right here on A Tale, oh yeah, A Tale of Two Hygienists.
All right, listeners, welcome into this special episode. I'm very excited because I'm joined today by Kathy Forbes. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about something that I think it depends on your brain. I think either this is going to really fascinate you or it's not going to be as fascinating, but regardless of your outlook on it, this is one of the most important things that we need to do as hygienists, as clinicians. So we're going to be talking about coding. And now the term is codology. Like I see that everywhere else. Is dental codology a term that you guys use pretty frequently?
Well, dental codology is a trademark that actually Patty DeGangi developed years and years ago when she goes around and speaking about dental codes. She was kind of speaking on dental codes on the East Coast, and I was speaking it on the West Coast. But she developed these little books that hygienists use. And when she needed to retire for health reasons, she actually passed the trademark name on to our group. And we're the only group of hygienists who actually go in and create submissions to be talked about at ADA to try and get codes amended or new ones. And so the dental codology has just stuck with that. Means we're going to go in and try and get current codes and current descriptors for the procedures we perform.
Oh, I love it. But the concept, though, you've been doing this for a bit. Like, what drove you to be interested in like diving into this kind of like very small segment of all of the things that we do as hygienists?
Oh my gosh. It was quite by accident back in the late 80s. I was working in California and I started working in practices and down there, and I'd already been teaching for 12 years up in Washington State. Moved to California, the practices I went into expected me to pick out the code out of the code book, and I'm going, what's a code book? And here I'd been teaching for 12 years, had no idea. So worked in California for a while, came back to Washington, and when I started temping, before I went back into teaching, I'd always put the code on my treatment notes, and the business staff going crazy, going, can you teach my hygienist how to do these codes? It would make it so much easier. So that's the short story, how I got involved.
Do you feel like, okay, so let's talk, I mean, you have a good perspective of time where I feel like a lot of people don't have. Now, the newer hygienists, I feel like almost they're compelled to know the codes. I would expect any one of my hygienists working for me to know the codes inside and out. Is that not the norm? Do you feel like kind of it just generally in hygiene, or is it becoming the norm?
It is not the norm. That's why I'm still talking about it. Most dental hygiene programs do not teach CDT procedure codes. There's like 330 dental hygiene programs across the country, and very few of them are teaching it. And it drives me crazy because it's not, I can show them how to implement it very easily, but they just kind of stay away from it. And yet the dental practices are expecting hygienists to know them, and they don't. So the most common question I get after any of my CE courses is, why didn't they teach me this in dental hygiene school? Yeah. So I'm trying to work with them to do that.
I'm really curious. I would love to see, like, I don't know, you probably don't have this information handy, but are like the hygienists that are using, computers, because remember, like back in the day when we were doing like all paper charting, like we had to know the codes, we wrote them in. Well, I mean, our offices did. And so we'd write them into the little code segment. Right. And then now so much of it's automated, where it's like, okay, like you did this procedure, but then when you walk it out, then the procedure code gets kind of attached on the back end, where the hygienists don't necessarily know it. They just read the words and that's what they assign to it. So I'd be interested to know if like it's getting easier or harder because of technology to know your codes properly.
I personally don't think it's harder to know the codes. You just have to learn it, and give the CDT manual every year, which is updated yearly. But the problem is in private practices, the software programs only give the number, like a D1110, and the title, adult prophy, but they don't give the descriptor. And the descriptors can be edited. And what's happening is, number one, they don't know the number, but even if they do, are they doing everything under that descriptor? Because if they're not, there's risk management issues, there's fraudulent issues, there's all sorts of things going on, and not many offices keep up on a yearly basis on this.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's true. I mean, so many things have changed. I kind of want to pick your brain about a couple of them that have changed this
Sure.
last year. But before we get into that, I want to just listeners, I don't have Kathy for very long on this episode, and we're going to definitely have her back multiple times because there's just so much in this space that I want to know. I'm so interested in this. But the reason why I'm having you on this very specific episode is because you all just went to was it a code maintenance
committee? It meets once a year at ADA headquarters, and there's 24 members on this committee representing the specialties and the insurance carriers and ADA, and they look at submissions that have been made. Unless this year there were 91 submissions, and they actually vote on whether they'll be accepted, rejected, whatever. And people can go and give verbal testimony on it. And our group, yes, we submitted 11 submissions this year, and we had 5 of them with some, editing, but
Sure.
didn't change the intent. But we had 5 of them pass, which was the most we've ever had passed at one time out of the 11 we submitted.
So let's talk about, so we have this consortium that you're working with of hygienists, and you as a group are working all year long. You collect the things and say, this is what we're going to submit. Do you submit before the meeting, or is this
Yes.
you go to the meeting and you submit? Okay.
No,
So
they have to be they have to be submitted by November 1st
Oh,
to be considered at the March meeting for the next year's
Really?
book.
Oh my
It's
God.
crazy. It's crazy.
I mean,
So,
I know there's a lot of work that gets into changing those codes, though, right? I mean, all the years have to change. I mean, everything changes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you have this group. What other groups are involved at these meetings?
You'll find people who have products, manufacturers that are manufacturing maybe new products. First of all, a product can't create a code. It has to be a procedure, just like they are not insurance codes. That's one thing our profession needs is quit calling them as insurance codes, but they're procedure codes. And they want to, have their product for what it does. And there's so many new things coming out research-wise. The carries management category is just exploding with new things. In terms of who else is there, there's like the orthodontists, I think it was last year, had quite a few new different specific codes that they wanted to, so they submitted. Anyone can do it. You could submit for a code if you wanted to, and it would get in the pile. And we strongly recommend you go to the meeting, because when they call, we're going to talk about your code and you're not there, they think, well, if you're not there to support it, it must not be that important. So you got to be a little cautious there. But anybody can submit a code. But it tends to be, there were a whole bunch of AI codes that came through for artificial intelligence. They didn't even get discussed because I think they needed to be managed a little bit differently in how they're promoted. So, but those kinds of things can be from anybody. Anybody can submit a code.
So the codes get submitted November. You must have an advanced copy. You're reviewing them. So when you come to the meeting, you know what to talk about. And then do you break up into little groups and talk about each individual codes, or how does the editing part of it or the, adjustment part of it go?
Sure. During the year, we tend to, in fact, our consortium's already focusing on, we've identified about 8 different areas we want to talk about, and we'll start meeting next month in work groups, and anybody can be on a work group and, start talking about what we need to put in the form that we need to support the particular, grouping that we want to do. And we work all through November. In October, I take those and I make sure that they're filled in correctly, formatted grammar, send them in November 1st. By about the middle of December, we get the whole listing from the ADA. And like I said, there were 91 submissions this year. And so after that, we take a look. We have, there's 7 directors on the consortium. I'm a director, and there's 6 others. And we go through them and say, okay, are there any we want to, give testimony for? Not just ours. I mean, our ultimate goal of the consortium is to get someone on the code maintenance committee, because hygienists, unfortunately, are considered a specialty, and they only let specialists in. But our presence is known. I'm there every year. Patty DeGangi before me was there every year, trying to get a vote on this council, because there's really no one identified as the preventive person. So we go through them, and then we determine who's going to go to the March meeting. I'm typically there before others have been there. When COVID was around, it was all virtual. That was really interesting. But it's in the first week in March, on the Thursday and Friday. And we give verbal testimony, and then we sit there and cross our fingers and listen to what they talk about in terms of passing and not passing.
So they're the ones that get the final vote at the end of it. Okay.
The code maintenance.
So, dang, the time always goes by too fast. I hate this. So I do have one. We'll talk about this maybe in a later episode. So I know we want to get into like very specific codes that have changed. But can we talk about the debridement code? Because that is something that I heard anecdotally, and maybe we can edit this out if it's a crappy question. But I had heard that the verbiage behind it had changed on it. So you still have the same code, the same title, but then now you can use it in different ways than previous. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yep. The full mouth debridement was a debridement to enable a comprehensive oral evaluation. Okay. Before you could do a complete comprehensive, before you could do any of the evaluations, but it was before a comprehensive oral evaluation. The descriptor was holding everybody up because the descriptor kept saying that you couldn't do it. You couldn't do an exam, but actually evaluation on the same day. And that was really hampering, like my friends who work in nursing homes, they would go in and you needed, basically I say, if you can't see the teeth, you can do a full mouth debridement. That's what its intent was. So in nursing homes, they maybe only get one shot. And so they wanted to do it plus an eval. And the American Academy of Oral Medicine came up, and they're the ones that last year suggested deleting the descriptor totally. Okay. But changing it from comprehensive oral to comprehensive periodontal evaluation, which is the D0180. So the idea behind it was you'd do a gross debridement. I hate the word gross, but do a debridement so you could more or less see the periodontally what was going on. And then they come back for an 0180. The thing is, when they come in for that first appointment, you have to look and do something. So the ADA gave, and there's guidelines for D4355 you can pull up on the ADA website. And it gives 3 scenarios. And I wrote an article in RDH magazine about it, that they come in and just a normal patient, you do an OD0191, which is the assessment code, full mouth debridement. They come back for an 0180. Or they're in pain, so you do a D0140, which is limited, and the debridement come back for an 0180. Or, for example, like in nursing homes, you want to do that 0150. You can do the 0150 as long as you do all the other components. And if you haven't read the descriptor, there's a lot of things to do. So if you do that, you have to do all the other elements, do the debridement, have them back for an 0180. So that's the intent of using that particular code, is to do a periodont. What's interesting little caveat is when that code was first introduced like 20 years ago, it was called a comprehensive periodontal evaluation. So it's gone full circle and it's back to what its original title was.
That's funny. That's awesome. Well, I mean, the work that you all put in is very much appreciated. I would love to shine some more light on what you all are doing. I want to go into some more coding stuff with you on future episodes. The listeners, though, they're not going to wait for that. They want to hear you and see you now. Where can they find you?
Well, I have a website. It's called KathySForbes.com. So KATHYS Forbes. Got to make sure the S is in there, .com. And it lists all my courses. I write a lot of articles for RDH magazine. All those are and you'll find everything you need to know about me under the website. But also go to the Dental Codology Consortium page and sign up and join. We've got 2,500 hygienists who are interested right now that follow us. You can ask questions. We're going to start doing some Facebook Lives. We've got a YouTube channel called Dental Codology where it talks about a lot of this stuff. So a lot of places, but to hear me speak, I'm probably one of the only speakers that's focused totaling. I'm the dental hygiene coding coach is my brand. So I can come and talk and give all this kind of information. And my courses are very interactive. So they get people who come get their questions answered.
I love it. Kathy, thank you so very much for being on. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. This was fun. Thanks.
A tale of two hygienists.